Hiya, welcome adventurers, it's Cressup here, and today I've got an interview with Jon Ingold, the co-creator of Inkle, who have made some really fantastic adventure games in the past, such as 80 Days, Heaven's Vault, and more recently, A Highland Song. Now today we're mainly talking about one game in particular, and that's the one that they're working on at the moment for Inkle, and a little bit of a surprise, if you really liked Overboard, which I did, I loved, then you're really going to like the announcement that he makes for this one. That's pretty much it. I did stream this on Twitch, twitch.tv/Cressup. So if you want to check me out there, I also play and stream adventure games on there. If you like the video, give it a like and give the channel a subscribe. There'll be loads more of this stuff coming. And yeah, let's catch the video. Hello, Jon, and how are you today?
Hi, Laura. Yeah, I'm good. I'm all right. I'm good. I always get baffled when people ask me how am I, because it's like it's supposed to be just this sort of opening question, but I think about it
Yeah.
like it's just I'm one of those people who thinks about it. So like I don't know, about sort of 70% good. I think. How are you? Where
I
would you put yourself
I
from
would
0
say
to 100?
maybe 75, and I think that is the British
That's
answer,
nice.
really, isn't it? You're kind
Yeah,
of
right.
it doesn't. If
Exactly.
anyone's just like I'm amazing, you're a bit like, oh, that's a bit strange.
Yeah, yeah. No, honestly, whenever I have meetings with American people, which not that often to be honest, but when I do, I always start by saying, "Look, I'm British. I'm going to sound like I really am not enjoying myself,
Yes.
but it doesn't mean I'm not interested." Because I found if I don't, people get to the end of meetings and go, "Ah, he's very cool on this idea." And I'm like, "What? This is the most exciting thing we've talked about all day." But it's just they don't believe me because I'm just really, yeah, everything's
Just
very
chill.
level.
Yeah.
It's all very level. Yeah.
Um, I'm very excited to hear a bit more about the game that you're currently working on at Inkle.
Yes.
But I think it's been a while since I sort of chatted to you on here. I think it was when you just released Overboard, which I loved, and we chatted about that. So I thought I might just quickly have a chat, obviously because you then released a Highland Song, and which I also loved, but which was very, very different, it felt like, to other things that Inkle had done. And I just wanted to talk a
Yes.
little bit about that. I don't know how you felt the reaction has been to that, and what it's been like since then.
Yeah. So no, it's true. Highland Song was a very different project. It's not really a coincidence either. So Inkle is founded by me and also Joseph Humphrey. He's kind of the other half of the company. So he does more of the coding than I do. That's an understatement. He does the coding. I occasionally code things. He does the art direction and like the graphic design, and he's a very visual guy. And he's also Scottish. So a Highland Song was kind of a project that he really wanted to do, that he was kind of working on for a long time. And it was one of those games where it took sometimes you just fly through a game, and sometimes it takes a while to kind of bed the systems down to a point where you can really start to see how it's coming together. But there was a long period on a Highland Song where Joe was working on it, trying things, working on it, trying things, and I'd sort of not really have very much narrative work to do. So Overboard pretty much happened in the middle of a Highland Song because I didn't have anything to do, and I was like, "This is silly. Like I don't have anything to do." So we thought we'd do a fun little project that sort of fitted while Joe was off solving some problems. So we built something else along the side, which turned out to be really fun actually. And we did that again with the Forever Labyrinth, which also came out
Yes, of course.
recently. Yeah, right. And that was another one built while so Highland Song took quite a long time to figure out, and then I wasn't full time on it until early last year, I think. Um, you asked about the reception. I don't know. I never know how
Yeah.
games get received really, because some people say, "Oh, I love it. It's amazing." Then other people say, "Oh, I hated it." And those are both kind of valid. And like we never seem to have one of those games, maybe a bit with 80 Days, where like a million people just decide that it's wonderful and you can't say anything about bad about it. And it's just becomes a good game forever and ever. Like, your Disco Elysiums or your Elden Rings or whatever. It doesn't matter if anyone doesn't like those games because so many people do. They've just won.
Yeah.
Like, and that doesn't really happen very often, and it doesn't happen very often to indie studios. So like when I look at the reaction to a Highland Song, I don't know what to make of it. But I remember when we took it to like demos and things, and we watched people play it. That was lovely because you could really see people getting into the vibe of it.
Yeah.
And so I kind of feel like if I can't actually sit in somebody's room and watch them play the game, which I probably shouldn't be allowed to do very much because that's weird. Then I don't really know like how people find it, and it's fine. It's okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
we were happy. We're glad it got done. I like how it turned out. On to the next thing.
Yeah, totally. And quickly, because some people are asking about Forever Labyrinth in the chat. That
Mm.
is the free one you can play in your browser. That's right. I remember you
Yeah,
mentioning
that's
this.
right. So yeah, we did it a collaboration with Google. They have this arts and culture thing where they digitize paintings and museum artifacts, and you can kind of browse them. And they wanted a game that used their catalog. So we that was not a meeting with an American actually, but we had this meeting and we said no, that's impossible. Like if you make an educational game, everyone's going to go, nope, I refuse to play an educational game. You cannot possibly mix gameplay and education. And then we had an idea, and we were like, oh, well, maybe you can mix it if you did this. And they were up for it, so we built it. And yeah, it's an odd one because it's very different than our normal thing. It's only on a browser. It's free. It does have a lot of art in it, but it's also quite deeply English. Like it's a replayable thing. It's got lots of dialogue and characters and puzzles, and the plot is kind of when you get down to it, the plot is really kind of fun and complicated and weird. So I was quite yeah, that was quite fun. But yeah, it's in a browser. You can play it. Takes 20 minutes or 8 hours, depending on how deep you want to
Oh,
go.
okay. Well, that does sound like
Usual
an
sort of
Inkle
thing.
game then in that case. Yeah,
Mm.
that's very
Yeah, exactly.
and so yeah, speaking of which, let's talk about this new game that you're working on at the moment. And I believe this is the sort of working title or the title given for it, but it's not necessarily it's unlikely it's going to be the title, but Miss Mulligatawney's School for Promising Girls.
Well done, very good. You got through it.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm
Sorry.
hugely No, it's fine. It's fine. Every time I see it, I kind of panic and go, "Oh God, it's got so many words in it." Um, yeah, so we haven't announced what the title is. We have this idea that like we want to talk about the games we're making as we're making them, but we also don't want to accidentally destroy our own launch press beat thing. So we thought maybe if we just don't tell anyone what the title is, then we can launch it properly when we launch it, but we can also talk about it at the same time. So that's what we're doing. So we thought instead of putting the title up on Steam, we'd style our Steam page to look like an application form for school. So we have, and Steam don't seem to have noticed and taken it down yet. So that's great.
I
So at
see.
some point they might complain. Well,
Right.
yeah, I'm sure they would. Like we're just small enough that they don't care, but at some point they might care. But yeah, so that was fun. The game title that we will have is going to be short, punchy, and in classic Inkle fashion, it's going to end in an exclamation mark. But I won't actually say what it is. Um, but yeah, so it's one thing we have said publicly is it's a sort of successor to Overboard in a lot of ways. We've
Ooh.
taken a lot of the code base of Overboard and a lot of the kind of style and tone and some of the things that we were sort of fiddling with in Overboard and kind of pushed that further. Like as soon as we finished Overboard, I loved it. I mean, I remember when
Yeah.
we talked
Oh,
about it, I was just
love
like, "This
my
was the
game of the
most fun
year.
project
I
I've
loved
ever
it.
worked on."
I'm not just saying that; it
So
really
cool.
was. Like you listen back to the Adventure Game podcast, it was my game of the year. I loved it.
Well, it was just like it was so much fun to work on because yeah, I mean, like I said, I did it because I didn't have anything to do, and I just had this idea, and then a week later there was a sort of skeleton of a script, and it just wrote itself. It was magic. It was so nice to work on. So as soon as we finished that, I was like, well, obviously, I should just keep doing this. I should just make Overboard 2, Overboard 3, Overboard 4. So I immediately launched into a follow up, a proper sequel, and it just fell apart. Like I couldn't, I was burned out or I'd run out. I don't know, but just nothing came of it. And it kind of nagged me as like I, I ought to do something else with this because the basic structure of like a visual novel that plays like an adventure game where you've got other characters who are very responsive, but kind of you can manipulate them because you can tell where they are and what they're doing. That just feels like 100 games, right? Like it's not a one game setup. So it took a while to find the right sort of setting Obviously, we've gone for a public school in 1922, which is not the most obvious setting, so it took a while to land on that.
Right. So,
And
although that's not the
yeah,
title, some of the stuff it mentions, that is the setting. At least we can
that is
say,
the
yeah.
setting.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. The game is set in 1922 in Miss Mulligatawney's School for Promising Girls. They have one scholarship girl at the school who is you,
Yeah. I
Verity
assumed. Yeah.
Amersham, and something very bad has happened at the school, and she's going to get the blame for it unless you help her out. So it's still a detective game. Like, I had this thought, I think it comes from Knives Out, the movie. Like, this thought that detective games are quite popular right now. There's quite a few of them. People are really loving their Obra Dinns and their Golden Idols and
Yeah.
things like that. But they're all detective games built around the core concept of a logic problem, of like a logic puzzle, like those ones in magazines. And they're nicely done and they're characterful and they're clever. I like them. But if you look at detective fiction, which is like the second biggest genre of fiction in the world and has been for hundreds of years, well, about 100 years, it's not really about who done it and how and why. It's about like a crazy detective character, whether that's, Daniel Craig in Knives Out or whether it's Hercule Poirot, Father Brown or whoever, or Sherlock Holmes, like mucking about with a bunch of even crazier dudes, one of whom is a murderer. And it's all about these like lunatic characters doing lunatic things for lunatic reasons. That's what makes detective stories really fun, right? And that's what made Overboard fun. Like the detective stuff was fine, it was solid, you could do it. But really, it was just hanging out on a boat with seven loony guys and like causing chaos. That's what was fun about it. That's
Yeah.
why it worked. Um, that was kind of how we got to the public school thing, because I was thinking, well, what kind of setting has even more loony guys than a cruise ship in the 1940s? And I was like, well, a boarding school in the 1920s. That's absolutely mad. Like the possibilities are huge, and in fact they were. So it took quite a while to write. Um, so yeah, it's very much taking that idea of a detective story, but not really a detective game exactly. Like, is Overboard a game? I mean, yeah, it is, right? It's definitely a game, but
Yeah.
it's not a puzzle. It's not like a thing that you solve it and then you go tick. I have ticked the boxes.
But I
It's
suppose
it's a place. Yeah,
I was just going to say, sorry, there's puzzles
go
in
for
the
it.
sense of, you have to work out how to convince people that you haven't done this thing. And so you've got to, and I think it's quite difficult to do that in one sitting unless you've spoken to everybody. So it's almost you're getting, and I suppose it's also in real time, isn't it? Or it's not quite in real time, but the time moves
Something
as
like
yeah, yeah.
something.
So
Yeah.
it's knowing where people are and working out what you have to do in a certain order, maybe, and that's kind of
Oh, it is, and it's kind of a puzzle, but I guess I think of it more like a strategy or
yeah. No, I
something
suppose
rather
that's
than
fair.
a puzzle.
Yeah,
It's a tactical game or something. I don't know. There just aren't good words for this stuff, but like it's really fun. I found it really fun to play with on Overboard. It's been really fun to play with on the new game. But it's very much in that kind of mold. So it's like it's a tight setting. It's got a lot more characters. The great thing about a school as well is that there's like three times as many characters in the cast as Overboard anyway. But because they're in a school, they're constantly in the same room as each other. So people keep seeing what everyone else is doing, and then they keep talking about it because kids at school, they talk about what happens. They don't just disappear off to their cabin to read a book. So I kind of came off the back of Overboard thinking, wow, we've got this magical code base that lets us run independent, intelligent human characters around, and they can like, and you can mess with their day and change what they believe, and it all pans out. Like I can do anything. Wow, I can definitely do a school where there's all these characters colliding into each other the whole time. And it turns out, no, absolutely, the code didn't work at all. It does now.
right. Okay.
It didn't. But it didn't then. I thought it would, and then it went horrendously wrong. So I've spent about a year just repairing it. It's kind of a miracle that Overboard works, actually. Like the amount of things I found that were wrong with the code, but that's fine. It's all good. Um, where we get to is a place where, like on a good day, you do a run of kind of the school game, and it's like a farce. You come out of one room and somebody's there, and then they've seen this thing through a window, and then you go there to deal with it, but it's too late because somebody else is doing, and just like cascading down all the possibilities, and yeah. yeah, it's a lot of. I'm really enjoying it now. Actually, I'm really enjoying it. We're in playtesting at the moment. We've got about
Okay.
50 playtesters, and they're just the reports you get back are these kind of these the meme with the dude with the bits of red string. It's like, well, I went here and I did this and I did that and I did this and I did this and I did this and then this tiny thing happened, and you go, oh yeah, yeah, that's true, it would have done. Okay, let's patch that up. So it's going to need a fair bit more playtesting before it gets out into the world, but I'm excited to see if people find it as much fun as I do.
I think that's a good sign, though, that you if you're enjoying it and finding it fun. Will it be similar with Overboard, where that kind of time concept? I'm guessing it will be, and you've got to reach perhaps a certain point to do whatever
Yeah,
it is that you need to do. Yeah, so similar
yeah,
mechanics
yeah,
all
yeah.
in that
So
sense. Yeah,
similar mechanics because I like the way they box everything in. Like I kind of feel it's a bit like a play
mm.
or something. Like you've got one location, you've got a small amount of time, you've got a fixed number of characters, but you've got a lot of possibilities, and that's what makes it appealing and exciting. So it's not like a full term of a school and you're kind of going to school day in day out. It's not some kind of simulator game, because I think you could do that totally, but then if there were real consequences for what you were doing, this thing would get so complicated to think about and so out of control. Like the idea of replaying that, even as an idea, makes me panic. So this is much more contained than that. Like a run of it is a short, fun thing. There should always be something else to try. Um, but it's also a world where we've managed to layer up just a lot of things to do and discover. It's that sort of puzzle thing you were talking about. Like
Yeah.
there are secrets and twists and rug pulls, and
And I
it's
mean,
fun.
I don't know whether this would be possible in the school setting, but I did love in Overboard that you could just like flirt with some of the characters to get your way around. I don't know if that would be quite so similar.
Yeah, so it's yeah, I guess I was going to have to deal with this head on at some point.
Yeah.
Like in the original draft, I was going to put the character at 14 because 14-year-olds are so brilliantly not children and not grown-ups. They do all sorts of crazy things for crazy reasons, which makes them great protagonists. But releasing a game with a 14-year-old girl as the protagonist onto Steam is just something I cannot,
Yeah.
I can't be the person who causes that to happen. So she is 16.
Right. Okay.
So that gets us through some basic minimum requirements.
Yes.
Um, Flirting is not a massive component in the game. There's a little bit of
That's
it.
fine, by the way. It's just like, well, I'm
Inappropriate.
not interested.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's just, I mean, I'm very conscious that, like, I'm a 40-year-old guy writing about
Yes.
teenage girls in a boarding school. I'm conscious of that. I'm aware of that. Like, it's a great setting and they're great characters. And I think people write about teenagers, especially in the past. Like, when we write about kids in the past, they're always Oliver Twist or
Mm.
like that one from My Fair Lady. I don't even know how old she's supposed to be, or they're just mini adults, or they're like um, sort of like working class gold 8-year olds who are kind of going to work in the mine and only have one opinion in their heads. They're so stereotyped. We don't see teenagers in the past as complicated, messy, awkward people, but of course they are, because teenagers are everywhere.
Yeah.
So I think it's a really fun thing to be writing about, like to try and make characters that feel a bit more like actual human beings, just they happen to be in the 20s and coping with that in the same way that like I grew up in the 90s and was coping with that, and
Yes.
my poor kids are coping with the ruins of a conservative government. We're all teenagers are always like, what did you guys do to the world? Why is it like this? And I think that's lovely. So yeah, definitely kind of Veronica in Overboard is such a wonderful force of nature
Oh,
who will
she's
use
great.
whatever she has
Yeah.
to get what she wants. And Verity is on a different path with a different arc, but she's got quite a lot of grit behind her as well, and that comes out in some quite fun ways. But I don't want to. I don't want to spoil too
No.
much. Yeah,
That's fine.
she's a tough cookie in her own way.
Kate Gray in the chat says, I asked Joe how you kept all the threads straight, if you use some sort of post-it wall, and his answer was something on the lines of, no, it's all in his head, it's insane. I'm wondering how true that is, because I can't figure out how to keep all the threads straight myself, and my brain isn't that good.
Hi, Kate. Kate's one of our testers, actually.
Hello, Kate.
Um, yes. So, yeah, I do it in my head and on scraps of paper. I wonder if I've got any particularly crazy looking scraps of paper on my desk at the moment. What I do is I scribble things down, and then when I've done them, I recycle them, so that I don't have to keep track of it all. It's um, So it's a fundamental thing that I talk about sometimes when talking to people about interactive writing, and some people just find it horrific, and other people go, "Oh wow, that's really interesting." So it splits people. I think that some people, when they're making an interactive story, they want to know the graph, right? They want to know every possibility and how it connects into the next possibility. They want that map from Detroit, and that applies to the writers, and it also applies to the players. Some players want to be able to know absolutely that they have seen every piece of content in this game, and they know how to get to it, and they can write, a script that will find that piece of content. They want to know the structure, and that's great for them. I love that for them, but I kind of couldn't care less about that. Like, when I finish a story or a game, I don't want to be able. I feel like if I can look at it and see the map of the story, then I've failed, because then the story is just a map. It's not a story. Like, the goal of a story, whether it's a play or a book or a film or a game, for me, is it puts you in a moment that feels 100% real, and it feels like anything could happen. And there's that I talk about the cusp of the moment, right? The precipice of the moment. Like, anything could happen in this moment. And if you know that there's a map and a chart behind it, if you know that there's a structure, then you never really believe that. Like, you have to have that. That's why theatre's so great, right? Because at any given moment, an actor might forget their line, like as
Mm.
simple as that, or they just might play it a different way, or they might go off script, and they never do. But the idea that they could makes it compelling. And games can't do that because they're pre-scripted. Except they can do that because plays do it as well, right? Like, it's just a question of suspending disbelief. So long as the game is responsive enough in little ways, people start to worry that it's responsive in big ways. And so long as you can replay it and find a completely different way that things can spin out, you start to think, well, how big is this world? And eventually your brain gives up trying to answer the question, how big is the world? And it just goes, this world is real. And ideally, when people play Overboard, they don't see like a chain of events. They see a bunch of characters running around a map like lemmings. I mean, Lemmings is a good example, actually. Like, there's enough lemmings on screen in Lemmings that you go, I can't possibly keep track of this. They're just crazy. And that's great. So, yeah, I kind of deliberately write something that's so complicated, I can't possibly keep it in my head. And until it's that complicated, it's not good enough, because it needs to be. But that's actually not that hard to do, because you just start simple and then you layer in complexity by playing and adding stuff and playing and adding stuff and playing and adding stuff, and that works. Like, it's what we do. It's just I don't know everything in the game unless I think really hard or I read the files. I'm not an expert in it. Often players of our games are better at the game than I am because they pay more attention to totality of what's going on, whereas I forget about the stuff I've written because it works, and I write something new and I add things in. So I don't know. I don't know any other way to do it.
But do you
Like,
not write anything down, or you just keep it on? Like, you just keep it all in your
no,
head?
I mean, I scribble notes to myself, but I don't. And sometimes I do. Like, hang on.
Yes. Oh,
I have this on my wall about
lovely.
6 months. This is a sheet of it's basically a bin bag, a white bin bag, and you can
Right.
stick it to the wall, and it's got like, I don't think it's going to spoil anything because
No, I
it's
was
in my
going to say make sure
handwriting,
you
which is
don't show
illegible.
anything you don't want to show, but yeah.
And it's sort of a list of like provocations. It's more less of a plan, and it's more sort of, you mentioned something here and that hasn't been useful yet, so you better find a way to use it. Or, like, this character runs out of stuff to do at 3 o'clock, so you better think of something for him to do at 3 o'clock
Okay.
that's worth doing. Um, and so you kind of make openings for yourself, and I want to know where those openings are so I can come back later and go, oh, I'll put a thing in for this, which creates another opening down the line. But I don't need to be able to plan that, and I don't need to be able to tell you what all those openings were at the end. I just need to know what's broken right now, which is one of the reasons why we bring playtesters in early, actually, which is something we did first on Overboard. I've been trying to do with this game. The game looked awful when our testers started playing it. I mean, no disrespect to our artists, there simply wasn't any art. It was all like Microsoft Paint sketches everywhere. But the first sort of 10, 15 people to run through the game just found so many things that I hadn't written or that I thought I'd written that didn't work. And then you jump in and you fix them. And that's so you start to make it better. So it's actually quite, I don't know if the testers realize this, but it's really quite a collaborative process in that they play and then I run behind them desperately trying to fix everything before the next testers come in. And then, we had a new tester come in a week ago, a guy who's tested quite a few of our games, and he played it and was like, "Oh my god, this is amazing! The beginning is so good." And I was like, "Good, I'm glad it is because it's been through about 400 revisions." And he was like, "Oh, I just thought you did a really good job." And I was like, "Yeah, it's been through 400 revisions. That's a good job. Like that's how you get it to be good."
Yeah.
So yeah, it's and I love this part of development actually when the game is basically shippable. Like the art needs to be finished, but we could basically release it immediately if we wanted to. But I know that every week that we don't, it's going to get better and it's going to have another cool thing and another thing will tie up with another thing. And I'll realize, oh, this guy should really say something about that or whatever it is. And each of those little details goes in and it gets more and more intricate. And you can just throw in as much as you like. You can just keep throwing stuff in and it won't break and it won't fall over. And I love that. So yeah, it's really fun.
I'm so excited.
I'm so excited too. Sorry, I'm getting all excited. I said I was all
Yay!
British and dour, but actually, no,
Look
I'm
at
genuinely
him.
excited.
A couple of people are sort of talking about inspirations for this and what you might have looked at.
Sure.
I don't know if you did you look at, for example, that there aren't that many school-based games, but obviously Bully is one that comes to mind, but that's obviously very different because it's not in that kind of time field. I wondered, did you look at that at all? Were there other things you looked at for research, for inspirations? What were you looking at?
So, in general, I tend to take inspiration from books mostly,
Yes.
and I don't really know why. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but it's what happens. So I do, yeah, I remembered Bully.
It is quite different, to be fair.
Yeah,
It's not
it is very different, but it at the core of it, it does have that nice idea of the school being kind of like a microcosm of the city. Like it's a small place where anything can happen and where people can be powerful and important and significant. And like, I mean, I looked at that game a long time ago. But yeah, it's definitely floating around in there in the kind of bucket of things that make you think this is probably going to work. As a setting, it's kind of reassuring. Like if I think about Grange Hill, that doesn't make me think, yeah, this is going to make a great computer
yeah.
game. But if I look at Bully, I think, yeah, okay, no, this is going to work. Um, Otherwise, yeah, I tend to try and grab inspiration from as many different places as possible, partly so as not to be derivative, partly because I'm always looking for the things that connect with me rather than trying to do a good job. If you see what that sounds bad. I'm not trying to
I
make
get what you
Mallory
mean.
Towers, right? Yeah, it's kind of I want to know what I need, and that so I kind of pick from all the different dishes and mix it together. So yeah, my daughter was watching Mallory Towers on BBC. That was an inspiration. I read the Agatha Christie book. What's it called? Cat Among the Pigeons. It's not one of her better ones actually, but it was there in the mix. I found this in a charity shop. It's called The Wrong Chalet School, and it's a book from I think 1930 maybe, and it's about a girl who gets sent to the wrong boarding school by accident. 52 from the 50s, and it's full of shenanigans and it's just charming. But my favourite inspiration is a series of books called Jennings, which is not very well known anymore. It's a bit like Just William, basically, and it's about this lad called Jennings and his mate Derbyshire, and they're in a boys' public school, and it's a sitcom. Before they had sitcoms,
Okay.
they wrote sitcoms as books, right? Because the idea of the sitcom still existed, but they didn't have the format. So the books are hilarious. They're like complex farces in which like a scheme to capture some newts and sell them at the school fair turns into like a cascade of frogs running down the hallway and whatever. And they're glorious books. And I read them as kids and I love them. So that's definitely there. It's just this idea of school as a place for japes. That's fun. And then there's a little bit of like Roald Dahl's Matilda in
Yeah,
there as well. Because another one of those difficult conversations we kind of had was like, how much do we go with corporal punishment as a theme?
of
Because
course.
if you're in
Yeah.
a 1920s school, you can't just pretend it didn't happen. But at the same time, you don't really want to make a kid hitting simulator. So
No.
like we thought about that one and decided we were just going to remove it completely from the game, that it just didn't have any place. Like it's we actually had similar discussions on Overboard in like it's a game where yes, you can murder people, but there is absolutely no sexual violence in that
Yeah.
world. And there is not going to be any. It has no place there, and it doesn't mean that we're pretending that we don't understand what reality is like. We're saying that right now that's not important, which is the sort of thing I think you have to do as a writer, kind of consciously, hopefully. Anyway, that's very serious.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the main inspiration, right, the core inspiration, which is serious, is during COVID, during lockdown, I had a phone call with my aunt who has since passed away. And she told me a hilarious story about when she was a teenager and she had a maths teacher and this hilarious thing that her maths teacher did. And it was so funny. I remember talking to her and just being in absolute floods of tears listening to this she must have been 85-year-old lady telling me this story. And I can't remember the story. I can't even remember the name of the teacher. It's completely gone from my brain. And I can't ask her because she died. But it was so good that I thought, well, maybe if I write an entire game about japes in a school, my brain will dig this story back up for me. And it hasn't yet. But
Oh,
like it's
John.
sort of in tribute to that. I know it's I thought I'd go on this epic quest and catch my
Yeah.
white whale, but I didn't. But the white whale always gets away, isn't that probably the point? That's probably the point. Um, so that's definitely in there as well. It's a sort of tribute to my aunt, who was a brilliant lady. Um, yeah. So yeah. As with the way we write the stories, like it's very much a mix of things. I
Yeah.
like to kind of bring lots of things in, and that sometimes means I don't even know what the inspirations are because I'm too busy like drowning and just trying to get something made.
I mean, on that, Kate asked, oh, sorry, Anne Duran asked, how long after shipping do these narrative tangles leave your head? I'm guessing they don't in a way, or they get superseded by other things, but
Yeah, so um it's like I was saying how I don't have a map of the story, but when I'm writing, if I'm writing a scene for Overboard, I need to know what are the sort of things that the characters might have done in a given playthrough because it might affect the story. So I need to have a list in my head of things that can happen in the story. So I guess I've got that. And I need to know who the characters are so that they don't accidentally just change. Like Carstairs has got to be Carstairs, Veronica's got to be Veronica. They've got to care about the same things and want to do the same things in every scene that they're in. Otherwise, it's just a mess, obviously, right? So that's my substitute for having a kind of story map of the interactivity, is that I know who the characters are and I can pretty much drop them into any scene and know how they'll talk and what they'll do. Like if you drop Veronica and Carstairs into a dinosaur museum and the dinosaurs come to life, I can write that scene because I know those characters and I know what they're doing. And then if that doesn't slot into the game, I'll junk it, but I can write it. So that doesn't really go anywhere. Like I think I could probably write a Fog and Passepartout scene for 80 days if I had to, even though that was like 15 years ago now, something ridiculous. Um, Aaliyah and Six from Heaven's Vault still bicker in my head all the time. Like they're not going anywhere. Even though I can't remember the intricacies of the timeline of the nebula anymore, and I have to look that up whenever
yes,
anybody
that's
asks
fair
me about
enough,
it.
I think.
Yeah, right, exactly. So I think it's more like the detail fades, but the characters and the themes bed down, and they stay for a long time, which is lovely actually, because you kind of end up with these worlds in your head that you can kind of look at like little terrariums and go, oh, that's nice. But yeah, I don't think I ever fully escape them. Like if I pick up Overboard, I can still win it very quickly. Like I don't the maze is solved. I know
Yeah.
what to do. Yeah, yeah. Which is a shame in some ways. Like people tell me that like 80 Days is a good game. I've never really played it. Like if I try to, I just end up clicking the buttons and I don't really read it because I can't quite disengage from what I know about how it works.
Right, I see. Yeah. And is that, do you think there's going to be, would that be a similar feeling with this? Is there a certain way to get what you need to do and then it's harder to sort of replay, or will there still be elements that you can take from it? I suppose it's difficult to have a game where at some point you aren't finished with it, because that's kind of what gamers want. They do want to finish it at some point.
Yeah, I mean, and it's hard. Like, if you want to pigeonhole it, it's either an adventure game or it's a detective game
Yeah.
in the same way that Overboard is kind of both. And both of those are genres where ultimately you do solve everything. Like every secret is known, every puzzle is solved, every door is unlocked, and there's quite there's a kind of through line plot that you're working your way through in the school game, and people will finish that at some point, and they might have a bunch of unanswered questions floating around as they do that, and they might have covered the whole thing by that point, depending on how they play. And there are a couple of challenges. I quite enjoy putting random challenges into games. So, like the one in Overboard was the can you kill everybody on the boat? And it's not a sensible way to win the game,
No,
but we just thought
I
we
love
wondered if
that.
we could engineer it. Yeah, right,
It was
exactly. And
great
it's kind of
because it made you think
it's
about it
a
in a different way, I think.
right, exactly. And it's a weird one for me as the writer because it's almost like you set up these world and these characters and these stories, and then you say, right, let's ignore all of that and treat this just as a game of chess. But I like that you can do both, basically. And then people who don't have any interest in that challenge don't have to do it, and people who like it, and that's fine. So there's scope for that in the school game, that kind of play. You can't murder all the kids in the school.
No.
Um, Obviously. And that's kind of interesting because actually, you know how I said I'm not necessarily the expert at the game? Like I there is a kind of long tail achievement in the school game which I haven't actually managed to do yet. I think it's possible, but I'm kind of waiting for a tester to do it for me, like to see if it's possible. 'Cause I'm actually not sure. It should be probably. Um, so yeah, there'll be a little bit of that kind of additional running around for people who want to do it. That's the rough structure. In the end, I kind of agree. I like it when games stop. I like it when games actually end. It's a shame when people put a game down because they're just sort of bored. Like I want people to say, "Yeah, I've seen enough."
Yeah.
And it's very hard to do that on a computer because they're very kind of clicky buttons, and you want to keep clicking the buttons. So yeah, I like to try and design for endings.
Do you think it will be a sort of similar size as Overboard, or bigger at all?
I think it's bigger. It's certainly got more people doing more stuff in more intricate and confusing ways. Kate said on the chat, didn't she, that she's finding it hard to keep track of where everybody is and what they're doing, and that might even be a UI problem that we actually need to do some work on. But yeah, there's definitely a lot more going on in it. But it's not epically long. It's
No.
not going to be an epically long game. It's still yeah. It's like Overboard times a half
Okay.
extra or something, or not times a half, but times one and a half.
Yes, yeah. And I'm assuming
Maybe.
it's again the sort of you'll probably have to replay it a bit to get, what you need,
Yeah,
perhaps.
exactly. But it's a lot more designed to make sure that every playthrough is genuinely different. Like one thing
Okay.
that came up in Overboard, we had the fast forward system and that was nice, but there was an element of towards the end of the game working through scenes just to get to the point where you could do something differently. And I really, really wanted to see if we could solve that problem a lot more on the narrative level. So instead of frustratingly, you put it in front of people and they think, well, I could try this different thing, or I could just run through what I know will work until halfway through the game and then do something differently. And then they do that because they're confident it'll work. And you're like, no, do the other thing. Do this whole other thing. You could do the other. So we are trying to do some work to kind of get people to keep experimenting because the game really rewards that. But it can be very hard to persuade people to kind of go off their comfort zone, even when even when like the path they found is just the first thing they stumbled on. Like there's nothing necessarily good about it. It's just they go, oh, it's my patch of land and I want to keep it. And you go, look, there's all this land. You can go anywhere you like. Um, I've forgotten what the question was now, but yeah, I think the answer is yeah.
Yes, good. Thank you for that. So I'll round it up now. But if anyone does have any questions, particularly on this, obviously on this game, do drop them in the chat. You mentioned just at the beginning of us talking about this that you wanted to make different worlds to do with this sort of mechanic. Does that mean once we have this one, are you thinking of experimenting again, or do you feel you're kind of done with that idea?
So, yeah,
I suppose it's
the
kind of
short
hard
answer
at
is
this point to answer that question, but
yeah, because I'm really looking forward to the point when I can stop working on this because I'm
yeah,
quite tired because it has been quite hard. I think we've fixed 3,500 bugs at
wow.
this point. And it's just story. It's just story things. Click, 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 click. I think it's that kind of number. Um, so I need a break.
That's
But
fine. When did you start
thank
working on
you.
this?
Well, so this is the thing. Like in earnest, this version of the game I started maybe in January, February of this year. So it's been fairly rapid build. But the first bit of code in the project is 2.5 years ago because I tried it and it didn't work, and I tried it and it didn't work, and I tried it, and along the way I was kind of also building a little bit of code and like tidying it up and making it work slightly better and that kind of thing. And a lot of that code work has carried all the way through into the final project. But there are a lot of false story starts, like my my ink folder where I do my writing in ink. I have like a final draft. No, this is the final draft. A
Right, we've
final
all got
final
one of
draft. But
those.
this
Yeah,
time it'll like
this one.
loads and loads of those. Yeah, exactly. And I occasionally dip into them and go, are there any good lines of dialogue I should steal from like this other version that didn't work at all? And increasingly there are not. But having done all of that work to make, as I said, the overboard code really shouldn't work. Now that I actually understand how it works properly, it really shouldn't work, and it's luck that it does. Now that I've fixed it, it's really good, and it lets you do these really fun, this kind of, yeah, it's really fun to work with, actually. So I think it would be silly not to use it again as soon as a setting presents itself, or a character, or an
Sure.
idea, or a hook, which, that might be 6 months and it might be 3 years, I don't know. But yeah, I'd like to go back to it. I mean, if the game completely tanks, maybe I won't, but um, hopefully it won't. I and part of me has a vague. So this game is not a sequel to Overboard. Obviously, it's set 25 years earlier. Um, Something like that. I haven't done the numbers. But it's kind of there's a sort of thematic way that it ties in, and you could sort of make a
Okay.
trilogy or a triptych or something. You could make a set of three that would sit together nicely, and I can see how I would do that. And that's tempting. But I can't even begin to think about that in
No,
any more detail
that's fine.
now. So I don't know. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe it would be fun to just churn these things out and
Yeah,
like
of
just do
course.
that now. They're just too hard to make.
Yeah.
Like they're so confusing. You can't just I can't just knock another one out.
No, no,
It's a
that's good.
shame.
Concentrate on this
Yeah,
one. That's fine. We don't
yeah,
mind
yeah.
that.
Thank you. I
Right.
appreciate your permission.
Couple of questions to finish off. Wolfrog asks, "Who are you getting to do the music? If that's something you're thinking of at the moment."
No, that's fine. So in whenever we do music, we hire Lawrence Chapman, who is amazing, who did Heaven's Vault and he did Pendragon and he did the non-licensed music in Highland and he did the theme for 80 Days. I mean, he's just brilliant. And like
Awesome.
it's still there's a but coming. I get very angry that he's not more famous as a game composer than he is because he really is phenomenally good. However, when we made Overboard, we did the soundtrack entirely with found and public domain
Yes.
recordings. So we used like there are various ways that music can fall out of copyright, and we exploited pretty much all of them to fill out the soundtrack for that game. And I liked that. I liked the stylistic elements of that, and I like the tone of it, and I like the kind of scrappy nature of it as well. That kind of suited the project to my mind. So we've actually done that again.
Oh, cool.
So the soundtrack doesn't have any Lawrence Chapman
Right.
in it, which I feel very sad about actually. But I just wanted to big him up because I really, really, really like his stuff.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, we have gone quite wide across the surface of the internet to find things that we can use legally and to
Yeah.
kind of make them work together, and that's been really fun actually. Um, I really, really like the soundtrack we've ended up with. It's got lots of texture and some period and some anachronistic, and just got the best theme tune. The kind of
Ooh.
core theme of it. I just absolutely love. We're going to put it on the first trailer. Whenever the first trailer comes out, it's going to have this bit of music, and it really is just the most jaw-droppingly brilliant piece of music for this game. And like, I don't even care if anybody looks at the visuals; they're just going to listen to the music and go, "I want this game" because of the music. So
Oh.
yeah, the music is top. It's top notch. It's fantastic. So yeah, that's what I when I get sort of sick of writing and tired of bug fixing, I go off and find music
Right.
because
Yeah.
that's another really really rewarding thing to do, and it kind of brings the game up.
And Summer in the chat asked the question that we all want to ask, which
Go for
is
it.
there a tentative release date for this game?
Oh, well, somebody training to be a games journalist.
Yeah.
Um, no, well done. It's a good question. And to be honest, I should just say, shouldn't I? There is not. We were going to release it. We were aiming to release it this year, but it turned out to be somewhat more complicated than we realized to actually make. It now works. Um, we could like rush it out, but we're kind of into the end of the year already, and it's
Yeah.
never a very good time to release anything. And like we released Highland in December, and I kind of sort of regret that in some ways because like people just stupid stuff like people are assembling their game of the year lists and they don't play it, and so it
Yeah.
doesn't end up on it. And you kind of go, oh, that's unnecessary, isn't it? Like I'm not saying it was a game of the year necessarily. It was a very strong year last year, but like you don't even get a chance to try if you come out in December, and that just seems like a shame when you work on something for a long time. So it will be pretty early in next year, I should think, unless I have a brilliant idea for something complicated I want to add, or we get some significant playtesting feedback, or like there's just much more art than we thought there was, which I
Sure.
don't see how that could happen. But it's who knows what. I'm not making any promises, but I should think early
No, no,
next
no.
year. Yeah,
Well, just a vague time frame, I'm sure. And
vague time frame. Yeah,
some are also
exactly.
interested if it could be potentially exhibited if at next year's Adventure X, if
I
that
would love to exhibit. In
happens
fact,
physically
there's
again.
kind of an art. Yeah, no, we almost submitted a demo for this year's Adventure X, and we didn't, partly because I think well, I don't know if that's, I probably shouldn't say that anyway. Well, we didn't for a couple of reasons. Um, one of which was we didn't know if we'd actually be able to make a demo in time.
Yes, fair. I
So,
mean, that's a
like,
fair enough reason.
which is a fair reason, isn't it? But I'm sorry to miss it in a way because I love Adventure X, and like even if it's online only, I still love it as a
Yeah.
thing. And like yeah, and been it's just a great community, and I love being part of it. And I want kind of it's a place I want our games to be, and like I want to celebrate them there. So you know, if anyone drops out of the demo listings for Adventure X this year, which of course they're not going to, because who would do that? That's a silly thing to do. Then we would very happily throw this game in. But
There you go,
I'm sure there's
Summer.
about 500 other people in the queue, so it's fine. I'm not asking for favors. Um, yeah, yeah, no, I would love to see it there at Adventure X. I'd like to talk about it at Adventure X as well. Good
Ooh.
crowd.
Yeah,
Good
I
crowd.
mean, Summer's busy writing all this down, and says 500 other people. The queue is pretty spot on. Yeah.
Yeah.
um. So I mean, I guess in that case, are you looking for more play testers or anything like that, or you said you're at the play testing stage at the moment? I'm
Yeah,
not putting,
so
I'm not
it's
asking for myself, but I just mean it in case people are
no,
interested.
in case they're interested. It's always a funny thing, isn't it? Because on the one hand, yeah, playtesters are really important. It's really good to get people. It's invaluable to get people to go through the game. At the same time, if we get if we invite everybody to beta test it who hears about the game, then no one has
Yeah,
heard about the game. You see what I mean? So I don't know. Yeah, I always need more playtesters. People should just email us, and
great.
like I have a queue. I
Yeah, of
pick
course.
through it occasionally. It's a fairly random process, but yeah, yeah, definitely always.
Oh, amazing, John! I'm so excited. I loved Overboard. I didn't know that's what this was going to be about. So you've
Oh,
genuinely
fantastic!
surprised
Oh,
me.
good. Yeah, brilliant. Okay. God, have we not said that anywhere? I don't know. It's everything's so distributed at the moment.
Yeah.
It's sort of separated. It's hard to keep track
I
of stuff,
think at
isn't it?
least in
But
the early parts, I knew the premise in terms of that it was going to be at this school, but I didn't know the kind of link. But
yeah,
maybe
yeah,
you've
yeah.
said it in more recent things, and in
Well,
which
I've
case,
said it on the most
exactly
important
the only
channel.
place that counts.
Exactly, exactly. So yeah, it's official.
Great.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, it's
Well,
been really fun. It's the first time I've really done an interview about it as well. So actually,
yes.
it turns out I'm much more excited about this game than I thought.
I'm glad because it sounds
Yeah,
great.
yeah,
So
thank you.
good.
Yeah, I think it's, I don't know. You'll have to ask Kate in the chat. Kate, you're not allowed to tell the truth. You have to say it's great. Yeah, no, yeah, I think it's coming together. I don't know. I never know, and I never know, but
It'll
I
be
think it's coming
fine.
together. Better than it was 2 months ago, anyway.
Well, that's yeah. That tends to be the case, I imagine.
Yes,
Oh, really looking forward to
you
it. Thank you, John.
hope
Oh, you're
so.
right. Don't die.
Yeah, sorry. Live on camera. Yeah, no, thank you. Oh, it's been really fun. Thank you.
And Kate says it's great. So there you go, in capital letters.
Hey, there you go. Fantastic. Thank you. Checks in the mail.
Lovely. Yeah, there you go. Right. Thank you so much, John. And yeah, really excited. Obviously, when should people still wish list on that Steam page? Then that's still
Oh God, yes,
yeah,
please,
yeah,
yes, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, do no,
Okay,
absolutely. I mean,
great. Just in case
Steam is
people
a
are like, but if it's not actually that title, should I still? So they definitely
oh yeah,
still.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
great,
yeah. No,
great,
no,
great.
hit that button. Yeah, yeah,
I will
please,
pop
please.
that in the chat
Get
again.
everybody.
Great. Um,
There's a robot on the other end of it who likes that button to be clicked. I don't know
yes,
why, but it
yeah,
does. Yeah.
yes. Cool. All right, John. I'll let you get off to it now. But yeah, excited for it. Let us know more details as they come. And yeah, can't wait for it to be out.
Thank you. Will do. Appreciate it. Have a great evening.
See ya.